ready now?
I am ready.
Okay, shoot.
To give us a little background about your family heritage and history.
Oh, I thought you wanted to know when I was born.
Well, you gotta know about the family first.
Oh, the family. Basically, you talk about
Your
immediate
dad.
family or further back?
I would say your dad, or as far back as you can go, but I would say your dad and your mom,
Oh,
my grandparents.
your grandparents.
Yeah.
Okay. What can I tell you? Dad was born in the town I was born in, Roscoe, New York. Oh, no, he wasn't. He was born in something on the Hudson. When they moved, they came up to Roscoe, New York, where his grandfather lived. I was born in Roscoe, and R.L. Cochran, Robert Louis Cochran, was my great grandfather. He had the family farm just outside of Roscoe, and that's my dad and my grandmother, his mother, came up there to live with. Dad was born in Cornwall on the Hudson. That's where he was born. And his father, Robert Earl Tribb, was a school teacher, and apparently he had to go up to Roscoe to teach school. At any rate, maybe it wasn't that. I'm confused on the background because Robert Earl got into problems with a female student and brought home to my grandmother, your great grandmother. No,
My great grandmother.
my grandmother would be your
Great grandmother.
great grandmother. Gonorrhea in the early 1900s, and of course that was a huge, whatever. Now that happened later, along that. I don't even know if we need to get into that. You want to start this thing over again?
Well, I'll delete that part.
Okay. Well, we might not want to take it out because it is part of the family history, but it came along a little later. At any rate, my dad grew up in Roscoe, New York. And he was a star baseball player and a star basketball player. He also played tennis. What it amounted to was he was a big fish in a small pond. And my mother, I don't know much about my mother's life when she grew up. She was born in East Branch, New York, and her mother and father, George and Rena Ward, had a very little place out in the woods, a little cabin out in the woods where Mom was raised. And as my understanding is that her childhood life was extremely hard. Her mother and father were hardcore alcoholics. And during the days of Prohibition, they would make their own booze. George and Rena Ward would make their own booze. And then they would have these house parties where they would sell the booze. They would actually lock my mother up in a closet so that she couldn't see the reveling. They'd not board her up in this closet, and she'd be stuck in there in the dark for many, many, many hours. And she, of course, was frightened in the dark, because the house, you had a lot of things come and go in that house out in the woods, It wasn't a well-built house. It was just a little cabin. It wasn't built by a construction company or anything like that. And my mother, as I understand it, didn't have a real pair of shoes. I'm talking about shoes that a girl would wear until late in her teens. She wore Brogans. You know what Brogans are? You were in the Air Force. You had a pair of Brogans.
Okay.
Yeah, you had a pair of Brogans. Yeah, they come up like these desert boots I got on, except they were made of leather. And then when she got up in late into high school, then she was able to get that.
She did go to high school.
Yeah, she went to high school. So, and somehow or another, at a very early age, she began to exhibit intuitive capabilities, fortune-telling type things. And as the years went by, as she became an adult, she became a pretty well known in our community, in Roscoe, New York, and then Livingston Manor, New York, and then Fishers Eddy, New York, and Hale Eddy, New York, but eventually Liberty, New York. All of this is around one area, Sullivan County. She became well known for her tea leaf reading. She had really uncanny ability with that. And I'm she had 4 children. She actually had a 5th, but she had an abortion for the 5th one. I didn't know about that till late in my life. I mean, I was in my 50s before I found out about the abortion. But my sisters knew about it for some reason. But that was Dad during the Depression. He likes to talk about working for $9 a week on construction, 10 hours a day, stuff like that. Things were hard. I think I look at the way people bitch, piss, and moan today. Is that all right to talk about things being hard and this, that, and the other thing? They don't have any idea what really hard is, I remember going back in there. I was with my mother during World War II. Dad had gone off to work in the defense plant. And, that was a strange time. The whole wide world was at war. There was war on every continent. And you couldn't get meat without ration. Actually, we had little tokens that we got meat with. And then we had ration stamps that we got sugar with. Butter was non-existent. I mean, we just didn't get butter. We got lard, oleo it was called, and a little yellow patch of coloring to mix into it. It tasted terrible. You would rather not have it than it was just, and we would go stand as little kids in, my sisters and my brother and I, we'd take turns standing in line at the grocery store because the lines were huge, long. You had to wait to get a little meat. We ate a lot of ketchup sandwiches in those days. Then they had, everybody participated in the war effort. All the kids did something. We went out and we collected tin cans, which they'd take to the crusher, and they would crush up tin and recycle it to make weapons, not to make more cans, but to make weapons. We all collected milkweed pod, which was something that grew. Milkweed grew. These pods would grow out on the milkweed, and then when the milkweed pods were ripe, they'd open up, and these silk fluff balls would float on through the air. They'd be all over the place. And we collected milkweed pod because the milkweed pod was used to make the silk in them for parachutes. We collected newspaper because newspaper would be recycled. It couldn't be out there spending gasoline and energy to cut down more trees to make newspaper. So the newsprint, all newsprint had to be recycled, And as a little kid, when you went to school as a little kid, everybody was helped finance the war. We would buy we would go to school once a week or once a month. I can't remember what it was because I was so little. We'd go in with a quarter and buy a stamp for a quarter. When we got a book, these went in a little book that stayed there at the school. When we got $18.75 in the book, that book was worth then $25 in 10 years. We would be able to cash it in earlier, but if we waited 10 years, that $18.75 became $25. That's one of the. And then of course the richer kids, they bought $50 books and $100 books and things like that. But I had my share, and my sisters and my brother we had our share of the cheaper books because that's what it could be afforded. And I remember my dad coming down to visit us. He came down once every month to visit us while he was away at the defense plant. And then eventually him and Mom got a divorce. And I remember that. I remember my dad coming to me telling me I was going to have to be the man in the family now, for Mom. I was going to have to be there for Mom as the man in the family, I used to sit and watch her do the readings, the tea leaf readings, and I was the only one of the kids that took an interest in it, you know. Oh, and that's another thing. All us kids would fight over who would roll Mom's cigarettes. She had a cigarette rolling machine, and you couldn't buy rolled cigarettes. All the rolled, pre-rolled cigarettes went to the GIs overseas. Everything went to the war effort, you know. We would fight over who would operate the machine to make Mom's cigarettes, you know. Huh. And then, going back to the watching her do the readings, you know, I'd sit around and watch her. I'd sit in the corner while she was doing the readings, you know. And after the readings were over, you know, when a woman would, you know, get the reading, and it was always a woman getting the reading, she would then, you know, lay a little money up on the table. Mom wouldn't touch the money till the woman left, then she'd snatch it so us kids wouldn't get it. But she'd show me the cup. You know, she'd have me look down in the cup, and she'd say, "Do you see the tree? Do you see the leaves falling off the tree? Do you see them falling into the stream beside the tree?" Talk about what it meant to me, you know. And you know, I was getting an education in that sort of thing, you know. That was.
How old were you at that time?
I was about 7, 8, 7, 8, and 9 in those years. Because when late in 9, I went to live with my dad, you know, and I didn't really understand what divorce meant, you know. But my mother, I got to be more than my mom could handle. So, you know, my dad was. I thought my dad was living alone up there in the war effort, working in the defense plant, you know. And I thought, well, Mom's got Ronnie and Mona and Judy, and Dad, he hasn't got anybody up there to help him. So Dad needs me more than Mom does. You know, she would always have the other three. So, you know, finally I got her to move with my dad, and then we got into. Dad took me. At this time, he was living in Westover, which is a suburb of Johnson City, New York. He was working in a Remington Rand plant there, and we're driving up there in Dad's old '36 Ford. Dad broke the news to me that I had a mother I hadn't seen, a stepmother. Not only that, but I had a 6-month-old baby brother I didn't know nothing about. His name was Eddie. And I want to tell you, I was not a happy camper. I mean, that upset me.
So he was married at this time?
Man, well, he was married at that time. Yeah, that Mom had gotten a divorce and he had remarried. And there it was, you know. All of a sudden,
Who was his first step-sister?
stepbrother,
Stepbrother.
Eddie. And then the following year, I went there. Sister Jean, stepsister Jean, came along. She was the second oldest of the stepchildren. Then along came Johnny. Then came twins, Jimmy and Janet. Then came Ricky. And pardon me. Then came Ricky. Then Patty. Then Stevie. Oh, there was 8 stepchildren, 4 regular children. You know, oh, it was a huge family. My dad, originally my dad's child support. This is funny by today's standards. Originally, his weekly child support, when there was 4 of us at the house with Mom, was $25 a week. But, well, it was a lot of money back then, and he had working in a defense plant at different times. He had trouble. Is that when you talk to me, is your voice would be? Then he'd have to catch up, things like that, you know.
I guess he was too old to go to the war at that time?
No, that wasn't it. He had too many children. He had 4 children. Something else we didn't know. Dad never would have really had to go to war. Later on, it was found out he had 1 kidney that was not functioning. He was born that way with 1 kidney that didn't work. So he would have been 4F anyway. I think he's what you call 4D, deferred because of dependence. So in later years, as we were men, me and him talking, I said, boy, I'll bet you, because you know the women went to the defense plants, and the only men that went were the men that were deferred.
Right.
You know what I mean? The healthy young men without the dependence and that, they went to war. Every one of them went to war. Lots of them enlisted. You know, it was a very patriotic time you wanted to go, you wanted to do. You know what I mean? That's somewhat like I felt when the 9/11 thing happened. You know, I thought how, you know, what a shame I couldn't go. How come I was so old I couldn't go? You know, I would want to. I wondered if I couldn't get in touch with the Air Force, because I'm an Air Force veteran, and say, look, you know, I mean, I can do something. I can do guard duty. You know, I can work in supply. I can do something in the effort, you know, to fight this thing. And that's the way they went at it during World War II. You know, I mean, we would go to movies as kids, as a little boy, my brother and I and my sisters. We would go down to the movies, and what you got for the movies in those days generally was like you'd get a Western, and then you'd get an Abbott and Costello comedy or a musical of some nature. But in between the movies, there would be the movie tone news. It was called movie tone news, and they would show you the war as it had been filmed, probably 4 or 5 weeks earlier. You were always getting the up-to-date news that you were getting, which would be 2 or 3 days late. You would get on the radio, or maybe later in the later years of the war, you had some daily reports, but the news that you would get from the front was generally old. You didn't have embedded news people in the front at that time, you know. But I sort of lost my train of thought there.
Watching movie town.
Yeah, you'd go in and you got your thing there. You'd watch the American soldiers kick the butts of the Germans. We called them Heinies. And that Heinies. Yeah, and I think that was supposed to be Heinies for Heinrich Himmler or something. You know, Heinies. We call them Heinies. That's and Krauts. You know, that was the kind of thing that you called the enemy at the time. And of course, there were German folks around. You know, and I was raised in Liberty was a Jewish community. You know, and the Jews had just been slaughtered by Hitler in Europe. And then the Japs, we called them Japanese. We called them Japs, Nips. Just, you know, you had a name for everybody.
Stop right there. Make sure
Starting all over now.
All right.
Okay, yeah, I hear you loud and clear now.
Okay, now what am I starting on?
I want you to tell me about when you were born, where.
Oh, okay. Well, I was born in Roscoe, New York, 1936, and I was born in the house. I was born at home. In those days, you didn't go to the hospital to have babies. There were 2 doctors in attendance. One of them was Miller. His name was, I can't remember his first name. But the only reason I happen to know who he was, in later years, as an adult in Liberty, he treated me, and that's when I found out he was there when I was born. Miller figured into a lot of things. I was born in a house on a kitchen table, in a house that had no running water, no indoor bathroom, and you know, they heated all the water. They had to draw it in a well. They had to heat it on a stove. You know, they always showing you in the movies, bring the hot water, you know, when somebody's having a baby and stuff.
They really did that.
Yeah, they really do that. 2 doctors present and a midwife. And that was it. They pulled me out of my mother right on the kitchen table.
Jeez.
So.
And you were firstborn.
I was firstborn. Then along came my brother Ron.
What year was that?
36.
36.
Then Ronnie came along in 1937, 1 year and 1 week after me. And then Sister Mona came. She was a little over a year before she came. I think she was like 12, 13 months. 9 months. She was 9 months, a year and 9 months younger than Brother Ron. And then along came Sister Judy, who was named for Judy Garland. You know, they still do that. They still name girls after the oldest, after the movie stars. At any rate, Judy came along, I think, a little less than a year.
You were named after your dad, though.
I was named after my dad, who was named after his dad, or his dad. And my great-grandfather was also a Robert, R.L. Cochran, And then, I don't know where and then my middle name, George, was after my mother's father, George Ward. So I don't know where they got Mona's name. I don't know where they got Mona's listed as Mona Ray. I don't, and Judy was Judith Ann. I don't know where. Ronnie was Ronald Ivan. I don't know where they got the name Ivan. I swear to God I don't. I think it's a good Jewish name. We live in, the Sullivan County is a Jewish community, although we're Christian.
Was Ronnie named after anybody?
But
Was Ronnie named after anybody?
that's what I'm saying. I don't know who he
Oh.
was. I don't know who he was named after. It might have been Ronald Coleman, because he was big in the movies. That might be a name that you don't know, you know. So
And then your step brothers and sisters, the firstborn there was
Eddie, then came Jeannie, then came Johnny, then came the twins, Janet and Jimmy, then came Patty. I think it was either Patty or Ricky next. Patty or Ricky was next. John, did I get Johnny? I got Johnny in there.
Mhm.
Didn't I? Then after Patty and Ricky came Stephen. There was 8 of them. It used to be, I'd say my prayers, you know, and I had a little rhyme, because you did, God bless Ed, Jean, John, Mona, Judy, Ron, Janet, Jimmy, Patty, and Steve. Say, run through the rhyme, but you had to do it. You didn't want to leave anybody out, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. What else you want?
well, you moved in. How old were you when you went to move in with your dad?
Oh, hell, let me tell you the story about the old homestead first, okay? Where I was born on land that my ancestors had actually taken from the Indians. One of my great grandmothers, I've told you, you know how many times, was the first white woman there. You think about, I think about that land. I go up there. There's 2 graveyards there that we have people in. Up on the hill is where my dad and more immediate ancestors are, going back to granddad and great granddad. And
This is Roscoe.
Roscoe, New York. Yeah. And I always wanted, when you were there,
Yeah, we
when
didn't.
you came to visit, I wanted to take you down there. And I always hoped that one day we could go there. Mike has been there. When Mike got there, it was covered with snow and ice up there at that graveyard. But we got up there. We found the graves. It was a tough time getting up, tough time getting out, because Johnny was driving, and Johnny's a maniac. I mean, he can scare you on dry roads, you know. But, whoa, I got something to show you. We have to go across the street for you to take a look at. I got a little test on video for you that will freak you out. You want to go look at it?
Yeah.
Go do it now?
We'll go. Yeah, let's do this a little bit. And
Okay.
We'll take a
So,
break.
at any rate, you know, I was born in the house that my family had built, had taken from the land they'd taken from the Indians, in a house my family had built from trees they had chopped themselves. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The water that was boiled to, you know, to sterilize things when I was born, was drawn from wells that my family had drilled. You know, the way they drilled wells in those days, God only knows, you know. But you think about how rugged and hardy those people had to be. Because, I mean, you know, they chopped wood all summer. I got a picture in here of my grandfather standing in front of a wood pile that he was chopping. And they would chop wood all summer long to get through the winters. The winters in those days were extremely harsh. And they would always pile the wood up next to the house, because you didn't want to be walking 20 yards in freezing weather to, you know, to carry in an armload of wood, just to keep the house warm. You know, you wanted the wood right next to the house. So,
I assume that house is not standing anymore.
no, it's not. And I told you about Dr. Miller. What happened was my dad, God bless him, he got in some sort of a jackpot. I don't know what it was. And now, you know, I don't even know. This was stuff that took place after I was born. But my dad, as a young man, you know, young men get into jackpots. And he got into some sort of jackpot. And my grandmother, apparently my grandfather was dead. All the others, older than her, R.L. Cochran and his wife and all, they were all gone. And now the property was Grand's. She mortgaged the property to this Dr. Miller.
and something happened. He wound up foreclosing on it. And I think she mortgaged it to him because she thought he never would foreclose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she thought maybe she could just have time to, but she found out he wanted the property. That's what he wanted. And it just, you know, I remember my mother saying, I remember Gert, that was my grandmother. I remember Gert grabbing her douchebag and running over to Doc Miller's. So it's nice to know, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, my grand, God bless her, I always looked at her as, between her and Margie, the finest women that I ever knew. And my grand was a fine woman, grandmother. She was a sure enough bigot. I mean, people, everybody was bigoted in those days. You know, you came over, these people came over from the old country. They came from Ireland and from Scotland and from Wales. And you know, they were always wary of people that came in because it was invaders. Every time you saw somebody coming in on horseback, you know, generally it was an army coming in, or they had just gotten off a ship, you know. It was Vikings and crap like that coming in to just slaughter people.
This is who I've known as Gran Gran.
Gran Gran,
Yeah.
you knew as Gran Gran. And you, I don't know if you remember Gran Gran, if you ever,
I vaguely remember.
she babysat for you guys.
Yeah.
And as my family did a lot of times. Doris, even Doris, my stepmother. And then of course my sisters, stepsisters, all at different times took care of you guys. Took care of both of you. And then one time we lived right next door to them in Johnson City. And, you know, you and I have been by and saw that
Right.
place. We lost, I wonder if we got all that other story I was telling you, but, you know, when we were talking about the movie Total News and how hard things were. I mean, we didn't perceive it as being hard. It was what you did.
Right.
You know, the tough times might have, today you look back on it and you say, oh, that was tough times. But when you hear today the people whining and crying about how tough things are today, you know, it really shows you the difference in what privilege can do to you. You know, how soft it can make you. You know, what you going to next?
I was going to ask you about preschool, as far as, you know, before you started school. I mean, you remember any memories of those years?
You know, my preschool years. I remember we were at the home. We were at a house. We had a house in Livingston Manor. That's where Ronnie was born. And I remember I had a wraparound porch. And I remember one 4th of July, we're all out there. They're all out there throwing firecrackers and things like that because they hadn't been made illegal yet. There hadn't been enough people blinded. There hadn't been enough people had fingers blown off. None of that stuff yet. Had not enough of that happen for them to outlaw or regulate firecrackers. And you know, and we were all out on this wraparound porch. And I had this. I remember this as plain as I can remember it. I had this firecracker in my hand, and my dad's hollering, "Throw it, Bob! Throw it!" My mother's hollering, "Throw it, Bob! Throw it!" And my grandmother's hollering, "Throw it, Bob, throw it." Everybody's hollering, "Throw it, Bob, throw it." And I'm standing there looking at it, and the fuse is blowing down, and I'm holding it, and they're all hollering, "Throw it, Bob." And I finally just got it out of my hand. It got about that far away from me when it blew, you know. I remember that. Then I remember something happened to the sound. We lost all of
No, I heard you loud and clear. Go ahead.
You heard me loud and clear, but it wasn't in the
He
thing.
still has a recording. He still has a built-in mic. Go ahead.
I don't see how you can have it when it's not plugged in.
No, it has a built-in mic. That's what I was recording from before.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Then another thing I remember, my brother's birthday and mine were close together, 1 week apart. And I don't know what we must have been, maybe this had to be before the war, because my dad and mother were still together. And my dad and what I got for my birthday was a clicker gun. I don't know if you ever seen one, but it looked like, it's a pistol, and you squeeze the trigger and it go click, click. You know, as a matter of fact, it clicked twice, because it clicked when you pulled it, clicked when you released it. It was a Red Ryder clicker gun. And man, I was thrilled with my Red Ryder clicker gun for my birthday. And my brother Ronnie cried and cried and cried because
he didn't get a clicker gun. And nothing my dad said and my mother said, look, your birthday is next week. Wait till you see if you get one for your birthday, you know. Finally, they couldn't take it. Ronnie throws this tantrum. Ronnie got an awful temper. I don't think you got to see it while you were there. Ronnie has a fierce temper, even as a little boy. I could see him throwing himself on the floor, squalling all over the place, throwing things around. Nobody loves me. Everybody this, that, and the other thing. Finally, they can't take it no more. My dad opens up. In those days, we had ice boxes, no refrigerators. You had in the top of the thing was the ice. And always you would put your meat would be wrapped in sort of pinkish looking paper. That's how you told it from other things that were wrapped in paper. And he went to the ice box, opened up the ice box, up to the ice section. There was this pinkish piece of paper wrapped up. He brought it out, and there was Ronnie's clicker gun. Then there was peace in the house again. So I remember that.
Yeah, hidden in the freezer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had it hidden in the, yeah, well, you can't call it the freezer. Had it in the ice box, you know. Had it by the ice in the ice box. Because the ice was kept in a different little compartment at the top, but when you opened the door to the whole thing, there was the ice and all in front of you, you know. Then later on, somebody got the idea, let's make the ice compartment with its own door, so that you're not continually opening the door.
Right.
See, it's like it was when my dad played basketball in high school. It had only been a few years where they cut the bottom out of the net, because it used to be after every basket, referee'd run up the ladder, take the ball out of the basket.
It was literally a basket.
Yeah, somebody got a great idea. Let's cut a hole in the bottom, cut out the bottom. This man don't have to run up the ladder anymore, you see. I mean, it's just amazing, you know, it's just amazing. Somebody got a brainstorm. Probably was a smart man.
Probably the referee is tired climbing up this ladder.
Yeah, somebody, you see the light bulb going off over his head. So, I see, and you know, I can remember as a preschooler, we had a lot of, Liberty was a very small town, and we had a lot of freedom to run around. Out behind the area where we lived, there was actually woods, and we had little forts built up in the woods. And I remember an older boy and girl attempting to molest me up there in those woods. And I managed to get away from them and run home. They were my landlord's, our landlord's children. Told my mama and dad, and you know, that got handled, it got taken care of, and it didn't happen no more. I had a little friend, his name was Tommy Gavitt, and had a crush on his older sister, Betty Gavitt. She used to babysit us. She was babysitting us one New Year's Eve, and us kids were all asleep. Mom was out. I guess this had to be during the war because Dad was gone. Mom was out. And Betty screamed in the middle of the night, and I come running out, and we were in a little apartment on the second floor, and one of the neighbors come running in to see what was going on because he'd heard the screams, so to speak. Someone had come in and attempted to molest Betty, and it turned out to be the neighbor that came running in. It was, but I saw when he came in, when I told the police that, told them it was him. He went to jail for that. Did time, his name was Atkins, I remember. So, you know, getting you thinking about things I remember. Before I went to school, there used to be out behind the school was this big swing set. I mean, it was regular swings like you'd find in a park. You know, it had chain, sort of like ropes going up. And the big thing in those days for the kids was to swing back and forth, and then finally they jump and swing over the bar at the top. You know, as a little kid, I watched that one time. That's just so cool. You know, so I was going to do it by myself. And I thought, well, now I'm all the way up, like up even with the bars. Now it's time I moved to go on over the bars. And what happened? Swing went up to get up over the bars. What happened was a little slack developed, and it dropped me like this. And when the slack come out of the lines I was holding to, it shook me loose, and I fell right out of the swing and landed sand below. Landed flat on my back on sand. And I couldn't take a breath. It had knocked all the air out of me, you know, scared the living hell out of me.
Did you really swing all the way completely around?
But they were big kids. It was, like high school kids, only middle schoolers. Dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Dangerous thing. I did different times, different years, did some things, and I'll tell you about one a little later when we went to school in Pennsylvania. Something to tell you about it now. We went to grade school, 5th and 6th grade. I was in 5th grade at the time. 5th and 6th grade, a little country school in northern Pennsylvania. We lived on a big farm there. In northern Pennsylvania, we would go out during lunch hour. We could play ball. 5th and 6th grade was in one room. 7th and 8th grade was in one room. See, that's how small the school was. And all of us on farms, all the farm people had guns. I mean, you lived on a farm, you had a gun. Not the kids, the parents. But number one, you're out the country. If you had a problem with a stranger, you had to protect yourself. You can call the police. It wasn't even telephones. Well, there were phones, but it was a crank-up type. You had to get an operator to get you, and then somebody would have to get down there. God knows how it would take. So you had to, man had to be protecting his family, and then you had the potential of animals. You don't think about bears. You know what I mean? You don't think about them when you grow up in the city. But you might have to deal with a bear. You might have to deal with a rabbit, fox. So you had guns. So as a little boy, all young boys grew up shooting. A young boy would kill. That would be his rifle. He might not could take it out by himself. He might have to take it out with his dad or with his uncle, with an older brother. He had one old enough, But it would be his gun. We'd bring to school 22 shells, and we'd set out there, all of us sit in a circle, and hit that shell with a hammer so it went off. Talk about something dangerous. Yeah. How come nobody got shot? I don't know. But I want to tell you this, and I remember years ago right here on Valley Island when the shooting gallery burned, and all the ammunition was going off. Here's a bullet sitting here. When you pound that with a hammer, the bullet will explode. It'll ignite and explode. The lead will come out, but it'll just pump out. Because there's no compression in the barrel. It's the force of it being closed in, and the force like that drives it down the barrel, and out it comes in. That's why we got away. That's why we got. I'm surprised the principal didn't put a stop to that. Okay, what do you want?
You remember anything that you like eat back then? I mean, as far as
The son. Well, first of all, the teen years for me. I made myself unhappy because of the fact that that's something just more important. We didn't have a car, we didn't have television sets, things like that. And my friends had TV sets, the families had cars. But what we had that nobody else had was we had 12 children. My dad was a milkman, and he was the only income in the house. So there was no way for lots of things to be done, and that worked all the time. My dad was a milkman. He ran 2 routes. In the morning, before he went out and did his resale route, he had a hospital route. Ran 2 hospitals, one in one in Johnson City, and the annex, the hospital annex on Clinton Street in Binghamton. But I would get up in the morning with him before I went to school, and we would go out and deliver those. And then people eat. The upside of it was I got to eat real food. My brothers and sisters had to eat oatmeal, farina, cream of wheat, stuff like that. Because I was a working man, working with my dad, before I went home, we shot by Red Robin Diner, and I would eat bacon and eggs and home fries. And actually, like a big deal, drink coffee. That was, and on the Saturdays and Sundays I worked with my dad. At night, during rest season, I would set pins 5 nights a week or bowling alley. So I was working really pretty much all the time, and then going to school. But when I look back on it, I think about, because I lived in a house that had an adult in it 24 hours a day, cared where I was and what was happening to me and all my brothers and my sisters, cared for our welfare, was interested that we were doing the right thing, and sending our school be all right. I see that, and we had 3 meals a day in that house. I mean, we would have, the supper meal would always have meat and vegetables and, potatoes and things like that. And we sat down to a table in those days and ate meals. There was no such thing as eating off a coffee table in the living room watching TV. Even after we got TV somewhere around my junior year in high school, there was no such thing as, grabbing food off the table and go sit and watch TV and eat in front of the TV. Just didn't do that. We always sat at the table and ate our meals there. High school itself, I had 2 good friends. Actually, Pete Vandal and John Judge, they were friends of mine from 6th grade to high school, through high school. Both of them are dead now. And then I had another friend, his name was Don Haggerty. He had 2 names. His mother, his real name was Bowman, but his mother had remarried. She'd married a Haggerty, so we called him either Bowman or Haggerty, whichever we felt like calling him at the time. But he's the one that convinced me to go in the Air Force with him, and then he didn't make it through basic training, and I spent the next 4 years, almost 5 years there. But high school, I was in the teen years, I played ball when I had time to play ball. I wrestled all the years I was in high school. When I was looking back on it, if I had just had a little different attitude, I'd have been a lot happier boy. And I see that a lot of times in kids, when they make themselves unhappy. They got to find something to be unhappy about. You know, Mike is a lot that way. So.
How about girlfriends? You have girlfriends?
Oh yeah. In middle school, Kay Francisco, and then when I got in high school, one of my sister's girlfriends, who my sister Mona was going to school with, Eileen Fisk, Rosemary Holmes. Yeah, you know, it was.
Do any of them still live up there in New York? Do you know,
or? Eileen Fisk, Kay Francisco. I don't know what happened to her. Eileen Fisk married a cop, and her name became Eileen Danik, and she had a dance studio, and the dance studio is still active, but she lives in Florida now. And I understand, according to my sister Mona, who sees her once in a while at Christmas time, she comes up, still in great shape because she's still teaching dancing, you know, and you stay in great shape that way. And then Rosemary Holmes, the last I knew, was living out in Columbus, Ohio, and she had turned gay. But that's what happens. I ruin women.
They go gay.
So, we used to get what you gonna ask?
You said one of your jobs was the bowling pin, set bowling pin.
Yeah.
That was how much that paid?
Well, we paid in those days 10 cents a line. What game is a line? Yeah, and every night you'd get 60. You get 60 lines a night. So that was $6 a night in those days. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but for a guy not paying any rent and going to high school and all of that, here Michael's going to show you something. You going to show him something, Mike?
No,
and we'd get tips too, you know. I like to set pins.
a lot of people bowl back then, though.
I still do.
Yeah.
There where you came up to visit me, and that's a country where they bowl. It's a great Polish sport, and bigger bowling alleys. Now there's a lot of people bowl right here in Savannah, but automatic pin spotters now. You don't see anybody setting pins anymore.
Did you go right into the Air Force out of high school?
I didn't even graduate from high school. I like to have credit to graduate. I didn't want to go back. Haggerty talked me into going, and the reason he did was he was draft bait, and he knew he was either going to get drafted or enlist in the Air Force. So he says, Bob, why don't we go? We can go together. We'll go together. We'll be in those days. Air Force basic training was at Sampson Air Force Base in New York, about 90 miles from home.
Was that Army Air Force at that time? No, it was actually Air Force.
USAF.
What year was that?
1954 is when it went. Excuse me. August 31st, 1954. We went in together. Haggerty couldn't adjust. He was actually 2 years older than me. He couldn't adjust to military style of life. His mother took him off the base, came up to visit him, took him off the post in the trunk of her car. Somehow they managed to not have to take him back, for him to not have to come back. That was it. The service was, you know, to a degree I enjoyed the service. I was 18 when I went in. When I went in, I had almost a full year of Army National Guard time. I'd been to guard camp at Camp Drum at Watertown, New York. And, you know, we had war games, and I was a assistant rocket launcher. Rocket launcher is what you shoot down tanks with. I was on a 3.5 rocket launcher. I was assistant gunner, second gunner. And I enjoyed the military thing. I enjoyed being on the firing range, and I enjoyed the military exercises, you know. And I qualified with the 45, qualified with the 3.5 rocket launcher, and with an M1 rifle. Then when I went in the Air Force, I requalified with the 45 and an M1 carbine. So, but I like, you know, the military was, I had a good time in the military. Did you?
Were you, what were you, aerial photography in Air Force? Or?
I was an aerial camera repairman. And what they had done, they sent us out to Denver, 1954, and I was out there in 55 when they dedicated the academy. And I went to aerial camera school out there, ground camera school and aerial camera school. I got a hell of an education in photography, and then never did anything with it when I got out of the service. We got into the in the camera school out there. I was learned to repair aerial cameras, learned to work on aerial cameras on aircraft, and there was a lot of electronics involved with that. We had a lot of theory. I had a lot of trouble getting through it because I just couldn't see it. It was on paper, I couldn't see it, you know. Then when they finally sent me, when I graduated from the school, and I didn't graduate with big marks, I missed a stripe that I should have gotten on graduation because of the fact, I don't know what, whether they thought I just wasn't going to, you know, make it or what, you know. But they sent me to Lockbourne Air Force Base, a SAC base, Columbus, Ohio, and they had RB-47s. They had 8 cameras on them, 8 cameras, and the camera systems that I had been studying in the school, and I just became a superstar. I mean, I could see it in action on the ships. Everything made sense to me. All the theory that I'd learned that I'd had trouble with, it all made sense to me, you know. So I made 2 stripes right away, quick. I went from Airman 3rd to Airman 1st just as fast as it can be done. I mean, 30 days after I was on the post, I had my second Airman 2nd stripe, and in the length of time, as soon as my time and grade for Airman 1st was there, I had the other one on my sleeve, you know. And I was pleased with the work. I was proud of my work. I was proud of my skills with it, you know. I could spot malfunctions. When I saw a malfunction, when I saw a camera malfunctioning, pretty well knew where the problem was. Where in the system I'd find it, you know. And I got, you know, when you're 20, 21, 22, anywhere in the world you are, the duty is good as long as you're not in combat, you know. So I got to go to Little Rock, Arkansas 3 or 4 different times on TDYs. That was excellent duty. The women down there come right out. You'd walk across the bridge from Little Rock to North Little Rock, and the women come by. They come out of the Ozark Mountains down there to get themselves a flyboy. That's what they wanted. And they would just take us home, feed us, and anything else we thought would be good, you know. Oh, it was a good life. It was a good life. Made good friends while I was in the Air Force.
Was you got out of the Air Force in 58 then?
Got out in 58, yeah.
In Ohio?
In Ohio.
That's where you met your first wife?
I met her while I was in the Air Force. That was Judy. Coshocton, Ohio. She was from Coshocton, Ohio. And I met her out there at that time. And, you know, we played, and that's what I was doing. I was playing. But she took it serious, and she wanted to, when I went home, she followed me home. When I went back to New York, she followed me home. She had attempted a suicide when I tried to send her home. And her mother came and got her. Son of a bitch, she came right straight back. And, you know, she just kept coming back till eventually she got pregnant. That's how Bobby was born. You know, Bobby, we haven't seen Bobby in many, many years. But that's what happened. And in those days, you did the right thing. You know, a man does the right thing. You marry the woman that you get pregnant, and that's what you do, you know. Yeah, and I told her, I said, you know, Judy, I'm just not husband material, you know. What you need to do is have the baby, and I'll pay the medical, and I'll pay you child support. But, you know, marriage just isn't for me.
Bobby was born in? Bobby was born in Columbus, Ohio, or?
No, Bobby was born in Binghamton, New York, actually Johnson City, Wilson Memorial Hospital. You were the one that was born in Columbus. And so things just weren't good for me and Judy. Not right, I mean, right from the beginning was no good. My dad and my grandmother put so much pressure on me to marry her. My mother was the only one that stood up for me. You know, she said, Bob, if you don't love that girl, don't marry her, you know. Well, I didn't love her, but I married her anyway, you know. Stupid mistake. And then, I mean, Judy had said, Bob, if you don't like it, I'll let you out of it. She was lying. She never would let me out of it. She's dead now. She died this last February 28th. And, but she tried 3 different times and succeeded to some degree of hurting me, hurting my career, hurting my marriage. She screwed up a job, 2 jobs for me. She was a very vindictive woman. So, she died. I didn't shed. Maybe one day my son Bobby will see this. I didn't shed a tear when she died. Not a tear. Not one at all.
What was it? Was this when you were into sewing machine salesman at this time?
No, when I met Judy, I was working. When Judy and I were together, I was working in a warehouse and trying to do some artwork. And then, I just had a little art studio in the house, and I, tried to practice and paint. But I worked in a warehouse. That was what I was doing. I'm making $1.40 an hour, but I was getting a lot of overtime, and we were on piecework, so a lot. I mean, I would average more than $1.40 an hour, although that was the norm wage at the time. When you talk about wages like that, it sounds ridiculous. Look at today. Think about a man with a wife and baby making $1.40 an hour, 40 hours. What do you got? $56. Where I was the home of IBM. IBM engineers at that time were making a whopping $10,000 a year. That was considered a lot of money. And in those days, if you had built for your family a $10,000 home, you had built something really nice. You know what I mean? What do you think $10,000 will buy you today?
Then you met my mom?
I met your mom. She was married to a fellow by the name of Dale Fairburn. She had 2 little girls. She was here from England. And,
what year is this?
I got out of service in 58, 59, probably 60. What year were you born in?
1960.
You were born in 60, so I guess it was 59, 1959. I was working in a factory at that time. The warehouse people that I work with was part of Endicott Johnson. It was an Endicott Johnson warehouse. And Endicott Johnson shoe factories were there. There was 28 of them. And we had a summer softball team, in a league, factory league softball. And I played softball that year. I was a catcher. And Jean, your mother, she was playing ladies softball. And her husband, Dale, was playing softball on the same team. I played softball.
I seen a picture of both of y'all.
What?
Mom's got a newspaper clipping of both of y'all on the same team.
And we, your mother and I, it was just, heat at first sight. I mean, we saw each other, and it was just the way it was. She was 4 years older, still is, 4 years older than me. But, it didn't bother me at the time, didn't bother her at the time. We both played ball. I had a phenomenal year that year. Playing ball, I hit .756 that year. Can you imagine that? And, I looked like a superstar down there, and I got no idea. It was my best year in sports, that type of thing. And I don't know what it was.
Her ex-husband was striking out.
I guess it was. He struck out. We would, in those days, and it's the same today, in that type of ball, as soon as the ball game's over, everybody goes to the bar. We drink a lot of booze and, party. And somehow Judy just, got lost in the shuffle. Dale got lost in the shuffle. And we weren't looking at the consequences. We weren't, your mother and I weren't looking at the consequences of the game we were playing, is what happened.
I just ran out of tape, Dad.
Okay. Ooh. Does that mean?
I got another tape.
Oh.
I'm going to stop there.